Welcome to the Influential Personal Brand Podcast. This is the place where we help mission-driven messengers just like you learn how to build and monetize your personal brand. My name is Rory Vaden, and I'm the co-founder of Brand Builders Group, a Hall of Fame speaker, and New York Times bestselling author. And this show is to help experts learn how to become more wealthy and well-known. I know you're going to love it. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. If you've ever heard the story about my son coming into the office and I have hundreds of books on the shelves and he grabs one off the shelf and I talk about, it was one of my favorite books, Never Eat Alone. That book was written by a #1 New York Times bestselling author named Keith Ferrazzi. That book and many of Keith's teachings inspired me early in my career about the power of relationships. Any of you who earn affiliate commissions from us every month from Brand Builders Group, or if you've ever, if you're the result of someone who referred you to us, your friend makes money. And a lot of that comes back to the book that I read when I was starting out in my journey, Never Eat Alone, and about the importance of building relationships, adding value, depositing more into people than you extract, staying in touch with people. And that book was written by Keith Ferrazzi. I'm so excited that you're about to meet Keith Ferrazzi. So he's a #1 New York Times bestselling author. He consults with many of the top Fortune 500. He is in all different types of businesses. He is one of the most respected consultants, I think, in the space. He's had a couple decades in this career. And he has a new book that just came out called Never Lead Alone. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about a little bit about Never Eat Alone and really the career arc of his journey of how he built one of the most recognizable personal brands in the world. So Keith, welcome to the show, man. It's such an honor to have you.
Rory, what a beautiful introduction. And I'd never heard that story about your son. That was really touching. Thank you. And I know it feels like a homecoming. I'm excited to meet your team here.
Yeah, so I'd like to start with Never Eat Alone. A lot of the techniques we teach this thing called the relationship switchboard, where we track every introduction that we've ever made. Our business model is inherently connected to paying people for all the introductions we've made. How do you do relationships the right way versus the wrong way in this space? Because there's a lot of like, oh, I'll do this for you only if you do this for me. And there's some weirdness around that. So I would love to just go like, how have you built relationships and what are the mistakes kind of you see people doing in this space specifically?
Yeah. Well, let me give, if you don't mind, I'd like to give just a slight backstory to how I cultivate the knowledge about the relationship world that we're in today. When I was a young kid, I was born into a very impoverished family in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania during the crash of the steel industry. And the challenge for me growing up was I had no effective role models. You know, I had great aspirations for tons of extraordinary success, but nobody in my family had ever gone to college. And it was a woman named Mrs. Poland who worked at the country club where I was working, who showed me the gift of how a person can open doors of opportunity when you weren't born into it. So like I was always bemoaning when I was a kid, the lack of nepotism. Oh, I wish I was born in these rich families like the kids I knew from school, etc. And what I learned is that you don't have to be born into it. You can earn into it through strong, real relationships. Mrs. Poland opened beautiful doors for me. And when I asked her, because I was her caddy, I asked her years later, I was like, why did you do this for me? She said, Keith, you took 2 strokes off my golf score. And it really leveled home to me that, you know, I showed up at the golf course a half of an hour early because my pop said, get up there and hustle. I never lost a ball. I was always on it. And, you know, I really busted my ass to be of service. I was out of scarcity, to be honest, and fear that I would lose the job. I needed that $20. It was the same money my mom made as a cleaning lady. But I learned early on that some of the most powerful people, and she was incredibly powerful compared to where we were in our family, the most powerful people in the world, if you seek out and think about the question, how can I be of service? It's absolutely game changing. Now, when I show up to anybody that I feel is an individual that's important to my network, I do my research. I call it the 7 Ps. My dad used to call it the 7 Ps. Prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. The 7 Ps. And I've identified what I believe to be the 5 packets of generosity I can give this person. 5 packets of generosity. I've done my homework. I know whether or not they've got a kid about to go to college, and I'll ask and I'll offer to be a conduit to internships. I know what their most important charity is that they're interested in, and I'll do my research in my network and figure out who I could introduce them to for that. I will ask them whether they thought about ever writing their book, because I'd say I'd love to be a Sherpa through you for this process. So whatever it is, like, and it's what I call and what I teach early on in Never Eat Alone, called the generosity pyramid. It's like at the bottom, it's how do you show up being the kind of person people want to hang around, and that has to do with your ability to be authentic, to yes, be generous, but just be the kind of person who can care about people, who listens and asks questions, and is doting on people and letting people know how much you admire them and respect them, and that whole milieu of what does it mean to build that kind of charisma? That doesn't mean you're an extrovert. I'm an introvert. These are things I had to learn because I'm not natural at it. And what Rory teaches you in terms of how to build your personal brand, you don't have to be a natural at it to be great, right? You can work at it, you can practice it. And that's what I did all my life. So number one is lead with generosity. The second thing is make sure you follow with vulnerability and authenticity. There's nothing that's more of a turnoff to me when I meet somebody is when they go straight into transaction mode, right? They go straight into, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? That sort of thing. And I understand that that's a natural inclination of people, but you want to take people out of that. Just like Rory, when his introduction, he introduced his son to me in the introduction. That is an act of vulnerability, of authenticity, of bridging from the transactional into the personal. The fact that Rory represented early on in our dialogue that I was impactful to his life. That is an act of currency, right? So I've got 6 sons through foster care and adoption. Right now, I'm struggling with one of my boys in mental health issues in Phoenix. And I will openly share these things not because I'm trying to make people feel sorry for me, but it's because I want to create the universal bond between me and another person, which is my and your humanity. If when I was young, I didn't do that. When I was young, I probably stood on a pedestal and I wanted to tell everybody that I went to Yale, I went to Harvard, I was the youngest partner at Deloitte. I wanted to prove myself, right? And as a result, all I was doing is distancing myself. I talk a lot about this in detail in a TED Talk that I give, which you can see online. Anyway, Gloria, I've been going on too long.
No, that's good. So one of the things you said reminded me, actually, you were talking about charity. It reminded me of one of the things that I learned tactically from you, which I want to ask you about now, is getting high-level introductions, getting introduced to people of influence, getting introduced. I think that's more important than ever, right? It's podcasters, it's speaking opportunities, it's whatever, consulting. What tips do you have for getting introduced to people and building authentic relationships with the person that like everybody wants to meet? And so it's like everybody's trying to get to them and you're trying to get to them, but you don't, you want it to be kind of in like a warm way.
Yeah. Well, you already mentioned it. It's warm in that, number one, you should always put on your sleeve and tell people who you're trying to get to meet, right? And so if you let it known, then the people who care about you, who trust you, who you've served, who have benefited from you, they may be like, I know that person. So number one, don't be shy in sharing your short list of those to the world that you'd love to meet. Number two, ask people who you've already delivered a lot of generosity to, a lot of currency in their direction. Ask them. Sometimes I find that by asking somebody for a simple favor, like an introduction to somebody they know, etc., you're not asking to borrow $1,000, right? You're just asking for a simple favor. That actually strengthens the relationship. If you got to start with your generosity toward them, then at some point just ask. Now, as I said before, make sure you do your homework. I have shown up with, when I was early on, like 20 years ago, I made a list of the people I wanted to get to know. Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, both of the boys from Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. What was the book?
Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh, exactly. So like these are the biggies at the time, right? All of them now are best friends. They're all great friends. And by putting them on the list, that's the starting point. But then doing research. I remember when a friend of mine, Peter Diamandis, I knew Tony Robbins well. And by the way, Peter is a great, was one of the greats now too. And Peter will credit the fact that he has a speaking business today to me. And is early on when he was running around selling X Prize, he saw the money I was making in speaking, and he was like asking me for some advice someday. I was like, listen, let's book a lunch. Let me bring the person who runs my speaking business to the table. You bring your admin, and I want to give you the whole formula for how I run my speaking business and how it accelerates my life, etc. And he gets teary-eyed when he talks about that I spent that time with him and for him. He gets teary-eyed and he's like, you paid for my kid's college and then some based on that day that you gave me. So I
wanted to just say something. So I remember when you talk about doing research on people, one of the things that you said was you can meet people through charities and serving on boards and being involved with nonprofits. You always meet high-powered people. And then another thing that you said was anytime you can be of value to someone's family or their kids, that's like another really amazing way to add generosity, because it's like you help their kids. Like he gets teary-eyed because of how much like you helped him pay for his kids' college or get them an internship. Game changer.
There's a chapter in the book, first book, Never Eat Alone, called Health, Wealth, and Children. And if you want to solidify loyalty with a person, you are there for them when they're struggling with a health issue. You help them make money, or you help their kids. Very, very powerful. And on the health issue, early days, when I thought about this, I always collected doctors. Like,
interesting.
I got to know when I meet a doctor who's a specialist, I would build a personal relationship. I would invite them over to my house for dinner. I'd build a personal relationship. I'd go deep. It was a real authentic relationship. I'd send them, clients. I'd, refer them, etc. But more importantly, whenever one of my network knew that if they got diagnosed with prostate cancer, or if their wife got diagnosed with breast cancer or whatever, they were struggling with diabetes, I would get a call. And I would be able to open my doctor network to them, and it would be game changing. Sometimes I was the second call that an executive would give after their spouse when they got a diagnosis. So there's this whole area of leading with generosity. The next area is making sure you show up with vulnerability and authenticity. I throw dinner parties with some of the most successful people in the world. I do it, every other month up here in the Bay Area with major CEOs of the Bay Area. Now, a combination of the cutting edge $100 billion AI companies combined with the biggest juggernauts like Cisco and HP and others, all the CEOs. And they come to my dinners because I created an environment where they can serve each other. And the format is easy. I start, and everybody goes around and shares, what are they struggling with the most right now? That's it.
Wow.
What are you struggling with the most? And I set an environment where that's safe. And people always say to me, it's the most powerful dinner they've ever been to, and want to keep coming back. And they do. Some of those powerful CEOs come back repeatedly in a given year because they just want to tap into that network. By the way, I've never believed that anybody is ever coming for me. I still don't think anybody is ever. I have no desire to believe that people are coming for Keith Ferrazzi. They're coming because of the environment I'm setting up, and they're coming because of the people at the table. Sure, I'm one of them, and I may contribute to that. But I've never had enough hubris to think that somebody, and I will never let anybody sell anything. I will never let anybody pitch anything. I will only allow people to be of service to each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what's interesting to me, and I think that some people struggle with, is like the things that you talk about, they're strategic, right? You're going, how can I add value? Who do I want to meet? Who do I need to build relationships with that can be valuable to other people? How can I curate experiences? But it's like you're intentional and you're strategic, but it's not manipulative in the sense of you're only doing it to get something back.
What I there's two lessons and rules you got to live by. Number one is this is not a balance sheet. This is not I'm going to help Rory and Rory has to help me. I will help Rory. And yes, because Rory is a very successful person who has access to great podcasters and other people, I may accrue benefit, but I'm going to help Rory if I can help Rory. And if over time Rory doesn't return that favor, I might stop leveraging my energy in Rory's direction. But if he does, and we continue to build that relationship of mutuality and service to each other, et cetera, we're not keeping score, right? But it's clearly a mutual relationship and a service relationship, then we keep it going. And it needs to be authentic, but you've got to lead with generosity without keeping score, without expecting to keep score, because it will stink good if in fact you're showing up with that kind of transaction.
And
so that's the first.
People are always afraid that if I lead with generosity and I give, it won't be returned. And I see
What the fuck? I mean,
I've never lost.
It's like, even if you do, it's like, what's the big deal? You did a favor for somebody. You introduced somebody to somebody. What's the big deal? It's like, live in abundance, not in scarcity. And this is something I've had to overcome as a poor scarcity-minded kid for years. But live in abundance, not in scarcity. The second thing you have to recognize is that, so this was this idea of giving without keeping score, right? Giving without keeping score is the other. The other one is, just because you're purposeful doesn't mean you're fake, right? So why live your life through sheer serendipity? Like, if I just walked around the world and, everything was serendipitous, bullshit. When I started, I said, I'm going to build relationships with the most powerful speakers and thought leaders that I knew at the time, right? When I met Tony Robbins through Peter Diamandis, a referral through a friend that I'd already served, I showed up to Tony and I said, hey, Tony, I don't know what your B2B business is like, but I am one of the most connected people in the Fortune 500. That's my space. I'm not a consumer brand kind of guy. I'm like you are. I'm an enterprise guy. But if I think sales reps and high potential should be going to your courses. I would love to think about how to put a strategy together to sell B2B for you. And he's like, I want you to come to all my events. And he put me in the front row. I met some great people in the process. But what I did is I earnestly wrote up what I thought his B2B strategy would be, right? And that relationship, now I speak on Tony's stage several times a year. He's a great buddy. I text him all the time, and I this is a real relationship, but it was absolutely purposeful. And, if you said to Tony, hey, Tony, he targeted you. Tony would fucking laugh at you. He was like, why the fuck not? We were friends. What a great, like I say this to Peter Diamandis, who's one of my best buddies. And by the way, there's two really good podcasts your folks should watch. I'm not in this business, you are, and hopefully you'll enjoy the content. One of them, Peter and I sat, we wrote How to Write a New York Times bestseller. We did a podcast on it. And then the other podcast is How to Build a $1 million speaking business. So do me a favor, Rory, watch those podcasts and tell me how I have my head up to my ass, because you know how to do these things. But
we'll link them. So Peter is also a client of ours, but he was a private client of mine. Actually, one time we worked together. So I know him just a little bit, but he's so brilliant. So if the two of you guys did that, we'll link that up in the show notes
link that up. I think your people will love it, So anyway, but so I don't
saying there have been relationships where maybe I've given more to somebody, and probably ones where they've given more to me. But just because somebody doesn't return the favor to you, it's in the net. It's like it comes from somewhere else. You don't have to keep score, because it's like you can't outgive God. You can't outgive the universe.
By the way, I'm dealing with this right now, which it's so funny. I'll show you how this is a struggle even for me. I got a buddy who, when he and I went to high school together, and he shot off to become a decamillionaire way before I started seeing $1 million. And I talked to him, and I was building my enterprise business, and he had a business that's also sold into the enterprise. And at the time I was doing a book had just launched, Never Eat Alone had just launched. And And he was really enticed by my parties, and he would come to things, etc. He never invited me to one thing ever. And he's always bragging about hanging out with Jay-Z and down in Miami on a yacht and all this kind of stuff. He never invited me to anything. And it was really painful. And like, I got him introduced to my camp at Burning Man, and he had an extraordinary experience. I don't think he even said hi to me once when he was there. Recently he gave me a call, and he's going through divorce. So he lost half of his wealth. His business has slowed down. A number of things have happened to him, and he's desperately trying to get into an audience that I have in abundance. He would like to. I have 106 of the Fortune 500 CIOs, Chief Information Officers, that are in a community that I help coach to transform their organizations with AI. So these are the biggest of the biggest, the best of the best. He would love that introduction into that, right? Gosh, this is tough for me right now. I'm literally on text with the guy. So there's a couple of reasons. Number one, I want to tell him. I still want to tell him that I felt so abused in the past, right? And I want to tell him, and there's a piece of me that's old school, like OG Keith, scarcity Keith, that wants to tell him just to tell him. There's also a piece of me that was like, I hope you're not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I hope that this could be a changing opportunity for you, right? So there's that piece, right? But then the other question I am having is, yes, he's a smart guy, but to what extent do I want to invite him into my network?
So I get this. So here's where I've landed on this, because every day I get asked, can you introduce me to Ed Milet? Can you introduce me to Lewis Howes? And the thing that I landed on is it's one thing for me to give to somebody, but I decided I will introduce you to somebody as long as you can add as much value to them as they can add to you. Right. And so
you know what? I think he can do that. So that's a good litmus test. So therefore I suspect he would deliver in earnest the work that he would want to do for these people. And so therefore I've got to pick apart whether or not I'm still holding on to resentment, right? Which is not a way to live my life. So I think the answer is I should make one introduction and maybe watch it and see how he does, and whether he gives or abuses, et cetera, in that relationship.
Okay. So yeah, I'll be curious if I'll have to text you to follow up to be like, how did that go?
Please
Like, I'm so curious, but it's interesting because it's like, it always does come back, sometimes not through that relationship, but some other one. But, okay. I know you have to go soon. I cannot let you go because you are like the relationship guy, and you are also the AI, like you are consulting like the biggest influencer companies in the world on AI. I just want to hear you riff for a couple minutes on how are relationships going to change or not change, or be impacted or not impacted by AI, or how is AI going to replace or not replace that? Like, what is your mindset? You're so close to these two things.
Right. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the doomsday scenario. But more than likely, the preponderance of white collar workers will be unemployed in 5 to 10 years. AI is going to be able to replace most people's jobs. And to be honest, if right now, I could create an avatar of Keith Ferrazzi that would be better at answering questions about my 24 years and 5 books than I would be, because I don't remember half the stuff. Right? Now, would that AI be equally as good at nuancing a new question, like the one you just gave me, because I might not have written this answer yet, right? Very soon it will. Very soon it will be agentic, and it can extrapolate. So it could be that the best speakers in the world and most influential speakers in the world will actually be AIs. And that's what's happening that will happen in the future. Now that I've scared the shit out of you, right? Let me suggest what I would do if I were you. And Rory, to you specifically, you've just asked a very powerful question. And maybe this is something that you and I could go on a joint effort around. If I were you, Rory, I would reach out to like folks like myself, the top 10 most respected people that you have in this business, people who are making, millions, decamillions in the business of thought leadership, et cetera. And what I would do is I would ask them individually, if you could interview them, and about how they believe the future of AI is going to land for them in their career, in speaking, in thought leadership, et cetera. And then say to them, in the aggregate, I'm going to be interviewing 12 of the most powerful people that I know on this topic. I would love to then share that information back with all of you. What a gift. And it now puts you as the host of one of the most important questions that all of us are thinking about. And then you can start to build a community of us who are interested in this topic. And you can bring us together and we can share with each other. And we can, I created a word for your ability to create a community. So Never Eat Alone was about networking. What I'm talking to you about now is creating of a community, just like you have with budding authors and writers, et cetera. You could create a community just like I've done in Fortune 500 world of people trying to crack the code and figure it out about AI. Rory, you should do that in the space. Now, any of you out there have your ability to create communities in your space, but you don't have to have the answers. You have to be the host. The way to create a great community today is to be richly curious and your ability to invite experts in to co-create the answer that cracks the code of what you're curious about. And therefore you'll be out ahead of the curve. If we keep staying out ahead of the curve, AI can't bite us in the ass, right? So the key will be curious and create community out ahead of the curve. There's a wonderful little story I'll tell you. This is, by the way, this is an article I just wrote in Forbes magazine that you all can look up. I write for Forbes, Fortune, Inc., Fast Company, Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review. This just came out in Forbes. And it's an old story where there were two guys sitting in a park and they were hiking and a bear comes out of the woods down the way. You know about this story, you know it. And the bear comes out of the woods and the guy's sitting there and one guy just takes off running and he's clodding along in his hiking boots. And the other guy bends over and takes off his hiking boots, puts on his tennis shoes. And the guy running ahead said, "Fucking guy, would you need to run? And you can't outrun that bear." And he said, "Buddy, I'm sorry, but I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." So right now, I'm sorry, but those of us who are out ahead on this, not waiting to be victimized by it, we're going to be the victor. So richly curiosity, bring together the best of the best. By the way, this is all stuff, Rory, that, I told you earlier, I just launched an 8-week class.
Yeah. Tell them where they go to get, go to get that. And I also where do they go to get the new book as well?
Well, I'll give you a quick clip on Never Eat Alone in a second. Never Lead Alone. What we did is we took my first 3 books, Never Eat Alone, Who's Got Your Back, teaching how to build those lifelines around you, and Leading Without Authority, teaching how to work, how to build a team of people that don't report to you, like Peter and I are together, right? We're a team, even though neither of us pays each other. How do you have that in your life? And we created those 3 books and we created an 8-week curriculum that you can go to connectedsuccess.com and join. It's a small, limited group. We only allow about 100 people in a class. And the reason is because at the end of it, everybody's invited to my home in LA for graduation. And it's been amazing. It's been so much fun to be connected to this community that really wants to build the relationships that are important to their future and their life. So that's what this is all about. And now let me give you a quick pitch on the book, Never Lead Alone. For 24 years now, I have coached the highest performing teams in the world. That's what I do for a living. After I wrote Never Eat Alone, I've always been a coach of high performing teams after I left as Deloitte and Starwood's chief marketing officer. And I started this business because I really felt teams were crucial. And it's 20 years of research on what's a high performing team. I sat with Jeff Bezos' team. I've gone deep with Jamie Dimon and his team at JP Morgan. This is 10 shifts that every one of us needs to make with the team of people we're working with. The shift from being conflict avoidant to being candid and to have a challenge relationship with those individuals. Peter and I hold each other accountable, kick each other in the butt, and always tell each other the truth, right? Those relationships that you have to be high degrees of candor. Next thing it teaches you is in this virtual world, how do you shift from having relationships being accidental to being very purposeful and managed and planned? That's another critical component of how you manage your team. So I'm so proud of this book. And I would just say, if you haven't read the others, pick, start wherever you want. But this is the conduit of 20 years of research on how to build a high-performing team.
I love this. I mean, lead with generosity, give without keeping score, be rich in curiosity, don't have the answers, be the host. I mean, these are tenets and principles that they do not fail. They do not fail. And I think about going I don't know what's going to happen with AI, but I do believe in those tenets. And if anything's going to make it, it's going to be relationships. And so it's these things are really, really important. So, Keith, we will link to connectedsuccess.com. We'll link up to the book. At this pod, I'm going to go listen to the podcast that you did with Keeper, both of them.
Yeah, just text me. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on them. Yeah.
So thank you for your wisdom. Thanks for your generosity. Thanks for giving us a way to do relationships that's purposeful and strategic and deliberate and intentional, but not ever hurtful or harmful or manipulative in any way. So I really, really appreciate it, man. We wish you all the best. Thanks for making time, and we'll look forward to following your journey from here.
Thanks, Rory. Congratulations on your success.